Hello, everyone, and welcome to the brand new podcast, Titanic Legacy, a creative collaboration between the Titanic Book Club and Cove Pod, the Carganilla online variety entertainment podcast. This new show will explore Titanic's lasting impact with conversations with creators, authors, artists, historians, filmmakers, experts, and more who continue to produce creative work inspired by the Ship of Dreams. Thank you all for tuning in at home, driving to work, doing chores, working out, however you're listening. We appreciate you welcoming us into your lives for the next half hour or so as we talk about Titanic and her long-lasting creative inspiration and impact. This is Titanic Legacy, the podcast. I'm your host, Paul Carganilla, and today's guest is a prime example, the epitome, really, of a person who is making art, creating work inspired by the Ship of Dreams, and inspiring others as well. Her name is Alexandra Boyd. She is an actress, director, screenwriter, and producer. She played a first-class woman in James Cameron's 1997 film, and she recently produced Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, and is a co-host of the complimentary podcast Titanic Talk with her co-host Nelson Aspen. The documentary Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries is gearing up for some theatrical screenings in Canada with other countries on the horizon. And if this is your first time hearing about it, what rock are you living under? But also, we'd love to share with you a little peek. This is just a taste.
You get into a conversation with anybody and it always turns to, what do you do? I'm an actor. Oh, have you been in anything that I have seen? Yeah, I was in Titanic, and the eyes absolutely light up.
I've had the privilege of working on some really great productions, one of which was James Cameron's Titanic.
Everything about Titanic was different than other films.
My first day on a multi-million-dollar project, and I have a speaking role.
Diaries written 25 years ago, full of stories and memories of what it was like to be on that incredible film.
I just got a lot of goosebumps, too.
I'm dying to read this now. I'm like, it was terrifying. My screams were my own, not my characters. Ow, I'd really kind of forgotten that moment.
I think that we all had times of being disturbed by the truth of this story, and also had times where we simply had to force ourselves not to think about it, or telling the story would have been much more difficult.
I was standing there with Kate Winslet in my arms, James Cameron giving me direction, losing my absolute shit. Dreams totally do come true.
But I dread to think what might have happened had I been sober.
If you survived the Titanic, you'd survive anything.
Because I didn't go to film school, I had a front row seat watching James Cameron put his film together, not just any old film, that film.
I'm always happy to share the fact that I was in Titanic with people because it makes them light up.
The film gave me so much hope as a young gay kid. It gives you hope that things are going to get better.
Can I hug you, just the fact that you're in?
And I knew. One thing that I wanted to step back about when we would talk about how, would it be a flop or not? We knew that we would never experience anything like this again.
That's just a little taste. And of course, as I mentioned at the top here, we have the filmmaker, the producer, director herself with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexandra Boyd.
Hello. Ooh, little.
She's playing her today too. She's not feeling too well, but she's the show must go on. She said to me earlier, she said, we're doing this, and we're telling this story. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I am a bit croaky, but I think I'll make it through.
You sound fine to me, and you look beautiful, and I hope you're doing well. For anybody just tuning in that has no idea, Alexandra and we have had so many conversations already, just on her podcast, Ship of Titanic Talk, and on my podcast, Cove Pod, and it is just a lovely, lovely time anytime we get to have a conversation and talk about Titanic.
There's and even if you take it back 26 or 7 years now when I was cast, and I did a ton of research to write a monologue for James Cameron to present myself as somebody capable of playing a first-class passenger on Titanic. That was really my first proper deep dive. I had seen Night to Remember, but on Sunday afternoon classic television, classic movies. So I that was the beginning for me. And then 25 years, we wrote our diaries. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then you get on with your life and you get on with your career and you do all sorts of things. And in about 2011, 2012, I transitioned into directing and writing and sort of slowly gave up acting altogether. And now I'm writing and directing and producing all the time. So this last year and a half, well, the 2 years of making the documentary, and then this last year and a half since we've let everyone know that there's a documentary with all these behind the scenes stories, has gathered around us all of you amazing people. And it's really interesting because I talk to people in the public eye or in media, and they're like, oh, don't get too close to the fans, and they're a bit scary, and I get recognized in the supermarket, and I always feel a bit uncomfortable. How do they still know me? And I'm like, nobody is scary. No, they're all the most ingenuous, not disingenuous people, the most generous, sincere, and how could you not be when the subject matter is kindness rules? But I think actors are sort of trained to think that people want a piece of you. I was quite famous in England very briefly when I was on a show called Coronation Street. It's been running it's a soap opera, like a primetime soap. It's been running for like 60 years. I remember seeing it when I was a child on television, and then I'm in it, and I was sort of instantly famous because it's on television 3 nights a week. And that was the one downside of the job, because I loved the role and I loved working, and I loved the stuff they were writing for us. But the fame part just was not all it's cracked up to be. All you young actors out there thinking that's the be all and end all, Can't
go to the market without getting stopped,
it was, or you couldn't complain in a restaurant. I remember one time we were sort of waited for a long time for food, and she's a bitch on telly and she's a bitch in real life. It would have been we'd have had a lot of that going on, because it's up north in Manchester. It was fun though. It was one of the best jobs I've ever done.
That sounds awesome.
Jobs.
And you had quite a great career in acting before you transitioned to other things, and you were in Mr. Holland's Opus, of course, and of course Titanic. You mentioned briefly the audition process for Titanic. Can you touch more on that? You had to do research to audition for a role?
Yeah, because there were no lines. It was for the Countess of Roths, and she had no written lines. And I went in to see Mally Finn, and she said, come back in a week and either bring another actor with you and improvise a tea party scene or just write a monologue. I don't mind. Just put yourself in the place. And now we know, talking to Emily Schweber, who was her associate at the time, that was very common for Mally to get people. Yes, you've got 2 lines or 5 lines. How are you, she would improvise either end of the scene to get you to really feel something, which was, it's excellent, and it's such a treat. So I went away and I went to Nelson. No, I didn't go to Nelson. I didn't know Nelson had this fascination with Titanic. I mentioned it at a party in his garden. I remember distinctly going, yeah, and I've got an audition for James Cameron for Titanic, and and it's for the Countess of Roths. He went, the Countess of Roths, who steered the tiller of lifeboat number 8 or 9 or whatever it was. I can't even remember now. But he knew, he knows. We'll call him up now and ask him. Excuse me. And he had a shelf full of videos and books and a piece of coal exhumed from the wreck and all sorts of stuff. So I just scooped that up and spent a weekend. And I hadn't really written anything. I was not a writer then by any stretch of the imagination. So a writer friend helped me, and a director friend watched me do the monologue. And I went in and they put me on tape, and I was in tears at the end. Mally Finn was in tears at the end, and that was it. And then I was at a party and I heard through another actress that the part had gone. Had been cast. And I was really fed up. Like, there are many jobs that you go, you audition, Paul.
They say do your audition and forget about it. That's the best you can do. But some roles you just have to, you can't forget about.
It's the absolute best you can do. And most of the time it's, two sides if you're lucky. This was no sides, it was my own sides. But I had really immersed myself, and I really got excited about the idea of, and of course I had no idea what I was in for. I just thought it would be a great project because it's such a great story. Sure. No script or anything, just and also another caveat, you'll love this as an actor. I had no agent at the time. My friend was working in a manager's office, and he was the one that called me and said they're looking for British actors. And he kind of said, I could lose my job, but I'll put you up for it. And I kept calling, Anyway, I did the rounds. I was doing rounds of agents, and I said, I'm going up for Titanic. It's this part. And this agent pulled the breakdown. He went, the part has no lines. Why would you want to do a job like that? Again, no one knew. Anyway, what it was James Cameron was looking for people who could look, appear, and sound and bear themselves, have the bearing of somebody from 1912. And back in the day, I did have a very vintage look. Can you hear my pug snoring? Willie, he's snoring down there.
Can't hear him.
You can't hear him? Oh, he's having a good dream, I'm sure. So that part had gone, but then 3 weeks goes by, I get a phone call, I get a page, I'm catering, and I get a page. And they had called to say, you have 4 guaranteed days because Jim saw your tape and said, get her another job, get her another part. We've got plenty of parts. He wanted to fill the ship. He wanted to make a small city out of that ship. And although, of course, it never really worked out like that because there was so much they filmed that they couldn't use. They'd have had a 6-hour movie. Right. He wanted to recur people. He wanted to see people here and then see them getting into the boats, and like not just Jack and Rose and Ruth and Molly and all those people. He wanted a sort of pyramid of characters, which he has, but he just had more than he used.
Well, and it's brilliant too, because if anybody's been on a cruise, that's what happens. Like if you're on a cruise for 3 or 4 days longer, you see the same people over and over at this, doing the same, doing stuff around the ship. And it's always been, before I knew any of you, and shout out to Judy Preston-Incy, who's in the live chat saying hello. I was always amazed by the work of the background actors, because when I was trying to get my SAG card, I did a whole lot of background acting, and obviously having watched the movie so many times in my life, my wife Jamie and I, we just were like, the actors or the background actors in Titanic are so good. They must have had to audition, or especially in the sinking scenes, but not just that, but the way people carried themselves, the way Don Lynch talked about on Titanic Talk, and when he was on Cove, about how just putting on the clothes just makes you stand different and like makes you feel different, and you take on that character. And of course, James Cameron, he's an okay director. He did a really great job at just recreating 1912. But so much of that, the heart of it, is the background acting too.
There was a moment in, and I remember it distinctly. It was the end of my second day, and I was sitting next to Bernard Hill at the captain's table, and that entourage was all passing behind us and going to the big table to do the big table scene. And they cleared the set. They did last looks, cleared the set, and then called action. I turned, because I knew I wasn't in the shot. I turned around and looked, and every single essence of that room was 1912 Titanic, except for the Steadicam guy, who's also called Jim, and the cable wrangler in their cargo shorts and polo shirts, and they just looked out of place. It was such, I wish I'd had a camera at that point to see that moment where these two these two modern day people were walking through 1912, because every inch of it felt like just that day.
It's a whole different world that he created. I
Mm.
think it reminds me of I worked at Disneyland for many years, and of course rode the rides in my free time. But at the end of Pirates of the Caribbean, when you're coming back up to reality on that ramp, it's going so slow, and you can turn around and look back, and it's like you're leaving one world and going back to the real world. It just feels like a completely different universe, and that must have been what it felt like for you guys.
It was, yeah, it really was. And it was more, I think it was more evocative walking onto the set for the first time, because nobody tells you that stuff. You just do what you're told. You show up, you go over here, you show up at your call time, you get put in these amazing costumes, and then you're like, right, they've literally wound you up like a toy, and you just go toddling off, because it's what your reference to what Don said was like, yes, of course. And no disrespect, he's not even an actor, and he felt that immediately because he was surrounded by people also in costume. And for us, it's our job, and it's half the job to have that stuff right. When I see a period play or a period film where they've missed out the corsets, or the wigs are all just not so obviously not right, it distracts me from the whole thing. And actually, some of those things are some of the easiest things to get right. And forget the script and the lighting and all those other things you have to think about. But we had every single element was there for us. We call it NAR in the business, no acting required.
And as you are an independent filmmaker now, knowing just the job of the director and how many decisions you have to make and things you have to put in place to undertake something like this. Of course, James Cameron, with the budget, he had an amazing team. He got to handpick, his team and delegate the work. But it all goes back to his vision and what the story he wanted to tell and how accurately he wanted to tell it.
It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. I can't fault it, really. And people want to fault him because he has been a bit of a, he's been a bit of a terror in his time. But he wasn't to us. So right. I think, anyone coming to see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries looking for some dirt can keep looking, because nobody's memory of him. Well, there weren't any bad memories for the actors. He's harder on the crew than the actors. And less so now, by his own admission, that he learned his lesson. Probably you get more flies with honey than with vinegar. I don't know. But that's between him and his crew. But actors, he was in total respect of us. And I think he was hard on Kate, but she was a tough nut, so she held her own, and look where it got her. So
how amazing that you were able to work with him too.
Yes.
And there's a joke that I heard a long time ago. I think it was right after Terminator 2 came out. So a fella dies and goes to heaven, and the angels showing him around, giving him a tour. And while he's on the tour, it's like, there's where you can reunite with all your old pets, your family members that you miss are over there. And then at one point, they see James Cameron up on a ladder shouting orders through a megaphone. And the fella who just passed said, "I didn't realize James Cameron was dead." And the angel says, "Oh no, that's just God. He pretends to be James Cameron sometimes." It's just working with legends. We were talking, I actually was talking with Nelson yesterday on an episode of season 2 of Cove, but he was talking about, working with or seeing legends perform live that are now gone, like Tony Bennett. He's doing this Tony Bennett tribute show. And, who knows how many more movies James Cameron's going to be, but that's going to be something you'll always have on your resume, and you'll be able to talk about is having worked on a James Cameron film.
Yes. And it had, I didn't realize it at the time because I was a woman, and I didn't know that I was going to end up being a film director, because I didn't know any film directors who were women at the time. But I look back and I see that even though I didn't sit in a classroom with a pencil and paper taking down notes, to have that experience, that front row seat of how a huge movie like that is made, it is invaluable experience, invaluable. I mean, I seriously thought in about 2011 whether I should go to film school. Like, what do I know about cameras and lighting and this and that and the other? And over you learn that really you have to know the story, you have to have a great vision, and have the ability to communicate it to your fellow creatives. And then if you're super lucky, and as you go along and as you do more, you gather around you people who understand your vision and the way you communicate, and so you work with them on the second and the third project, and you build up a sort of team of people that really reflect and collaborate with you in a special way. And then the project always becomes bigger than the sum of its parts, because you're not this lone wolf trying to think up everything, you know. I really thrive on feedback and notes, and then sometimes I have to really sort of dig my heels in, but that's when it matters, you know. That's when you know it matters.
And you say in the trailer for Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, that it was like film school being on set.
Yes.
Megan asked a question, and then we're going to talk about the film and all the exciting stuff that's coming up for it. Megan in the chat is asking how many scenes you shot on Titanic. Let me try and see if I can answer this. So there's the shot in the beginning of you boarding the ship with your dogs. And then going into the breakfast scene, you're coming down the stairs. We get a glimpse of you there. And then when Jack is going into the dining room, we get that iconic glimpse of you checking him out. And then, as you mentioned, as they're going to dinner in the first class dining scene, that you were there at a table with Bernard Hill, rest his soul. And were there any other scenes that you shot?
I did do one scene that ended up in one of the computer games. I'm not going to remember what it's called, but because and here's a little caveat. I am also, just to answer the question, I am also on the gangplank with Rochelle as the Countess of Roth. She has an Afghan hound and I have an Airedale Terrier. You see us coming in through the doorway, but we are at the bottom of the gangplank with Billy and Francis and Kate and Trudy, Amy in front of us. So I'm in that shot. I'm just out of frame. I'm in the shot, but I'm out of frame. So I always kind of count that. And then the deleted scene is Ismay running down the corridor towards Cal for, you know, some reason. And I got to say, excuse me, what's going on? I thought I felt a shudder because the boat, they went when it hit the iceberg. Mm-hmm. And then they threw the engines into reverse. This is my research anyway. Please I don't want people coming at me, but this is my research at the time. May have changed. They threw the engines into reverse. So the ship that had this hum stopped. It sounded like that something was wrong. So a steward says, don't worry, madam, get back and, you know, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I was like, can we? And James Cameron goes, right. So you felt the shudder. Well done. Yes. He'd forgotten again that I had done all this research. He just loved it when you knew what you were doing. Because, awesome. You know, he's a nerd as well, right? Or he's the nerd.
Right.
And he said, so the steward will come by and just say to him, you know, ask him for a cup of tea or something, whatever you British do in a potential crisis. Oh, yeah. I said, that's what everyone thinks, that we just drink tea in a crisis. You don't think it's the movies that perpetuate that, do you? Anyway, so I asked for a cup of tea. But really it's to facilitate Ismay striding down the corridor. Now, that dress that I'm wearing, thank you, Zach Douglas. He pointed this out to me. He's one of my Titaniacs in Australia. The dress that I'm wearing, this beautiful silk sort of ombre, you know, pre-Raphaelite sort of, you know, art, going into Art Nouveau dress. It's just gorgeous. It was at auction about 3 years ago, and it's sold for $5,000. My name's in it, Titanic, and my name is in it. It has damage on the skirt, which I swear it was not me. It's just age. They hang on hangers. Nobody takes care of them. Excuse me, a dress worn by an actress whose lines were all cut in a scene that was deleted, sold for $5,000. I just want everyone to digest that a little bit and think about the impact this film has made on the world in the last 25 years.
And that is the impact that you explore. What I love about your documentary, Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, is not only do you read these diaries, which we'll just chat briefly about, but you also incorporate the Titanic in pop culture and the impact it has had on people, podcasters like Brittany and Ethan and Dale and Ilka, who I had the pleasure of talking with last week. And Megan in the chat says, oh, by the way, Brittany mentioned the name of the game was it was a CD-ROM game called Explorer.
Oh, okay.
Titanic Explorer. Okay, that's where you can find the deleted scene, apparently. But yeah, the way you incorporate, not just bring the cast members together, which is always so fun to see a reunion of cast members of one of your favorite movies, talking about their experiences on set, but also incorporating, the love for the film today and the culture that has been built up around it since 1997, and the way it draws people to Titanic in history. And it's so lovely. Where did the inspiration for this documentary come from?
Well, it was the 25-year anniversary and the diaries. It was a combination of those, because we had tried to get them published back in 1998 when there was no internet, no self-publishing. You had to convince a publisher. We put together a pitch for the oh, look, these are all these no-name actors in this film that just won an Oscar a year ago. Nobody cared. By then it was, and Titanic it had an impact, but it hadn't had a lasting impact like it has had. And I was noticing on my Instagram feed that there were Titanic related people showing their creativity and their artwork through the filter of the film. And I was reminded that I still have these diaries, and you only see 9 actors reading their diaries in the film. I have 28 of these diaries. I have Lou Poulter and Elsa Raven, the Strausses. I have James Lancaster, who plays the Father Biles. I have Francis Fishers. I have so many. But again, like a steward, another steward, or I don't think he's quite the guy that says that's White Star Line property. There's somebody else. Anyway, there's a number of stewards, right? And Amy, but Amy's in the film. But I just asked who I still could find. I was trying, who plays Guggenheim? Michael Ensign. I tried to get Michael, if he's out there or one of his friends is out there. I'd love to reconnect with him. But so I felt like, do something with them, and also do something that honors the actors who wrote them. Like, you could just publish them in a book and that would be it, but to hear the person reading their personal story and then having their own memories on the set that I didn't let them prepare ahead of time. That's why sometimes they fluff their lines a little bit, which I don't mind. And it's because they are taken aback, or they're not quite reading, they read it too quickly or whatever.
That honest reaction to something you haven't looked at in 25 years. Yeah. And then when we've had sneak peek screenings of the film, and that's how I met yourself and many of the people who are now in this wider community. It's LA Beatles and people who really had I would almost say a visceral reaction to seeing fans who are just like you, who, oh my God, I'm not alone. This is a joyful day, because it is a sort of closet guilty pleasure for many people now. And I think a lot of people have grown up and they're just like, oh, to hell with it, I'm just going to be my Titanic self. But I think I liked ABBA back in the day, and then I thought they were a bit kitsch, and then I saw Mamma Mia and I realized, oh my God, this is a soundtrack to my youth, and now I love ABBA again. It's that sort of thing. And where is the movie now on its journey to mainstream?
On its journey, it has quite a bit of a journey to go, but it's all being set up. So the first one is some rather fun special event screenings across Canada on June the 17th, like literally, from Victoria and Vancouver, BC, all the way over to Halifax and wherever the end of Nova Scotia is, and everything in between. It's like 23 cities. And it's a company called Demand Film, and they do this with documentaries all the time. The caveat is that in order for the screening to go ahead, they have to have had booked 35 tickets before they'll screen. So we're really on by June the 6th, which is like in a couple of days. So if you're in Canada, if you're anywhere near, get a posse of people, even if they're not Titanic fans, if they're film fans. I've been reaching out to film schools in those cities because I know there's a lot of people at film school because of James Cameron.
Yeah.
Just fact. It's either Steven Spielberg or James Cameron has inspired them as a young person, and they're like, I have to be in the movies now somehow.
So you hear that, everybody out there? If you have friends in Canada, if you're in Canada and you want to check it out, please share. You grab your tickets at shipofdreamsfilm.com, and you can learn everything else there is to know about the movie there on the website. What's coming up after the Canada screenings?
After Canada, we have tentative dates in the UK and Ireland and Australia and New Zealand. So we're spreading it out. And then a completely different company is taking us over for the United States. Dates TBD on that one as well, because we're still delivering all the bits and bobs and for that. And then Europe and the rest of the world will fall into place. And what we expect is that with a film like this, and every generation has a new flux of people who find Titanic and love Titanic, is that ours will become the go-to companion piece, because you watch the film and then you watch our documentary and then you have to go back and watch the film to find all those people because they're there, or it so well that you already know those people, that sort of thing.
And you mentioned companion pieces. I talked about it briefly earlier, but you also co-host a companion piece of a podcast. Everybody out there listening to this podcast is already on their podcast platforms. They need to check out Titanic Talk, the podcast that you co-host with Nelson Aspen. You've had so many amazing guests on that. How many episodes now are you guys up to?
We're at least 35, I think. And then I think we're going to stop in July-ish. And then we have to sort of regroup and see if we can come up with we didn't know we were going to have season 1. We thought we'd have about 10 people, and then we had 24 episodes. You know what it's like. You build it and they will come, they will find you, or you will find them. And we're looking for really unusual angles of Titanic, whether it's the food, or we saw a young woman talking about the fragrance. They found some vials of fragrance from the wreck, and they still smell amazing because they've been literally hermetically sealed for 90 years or whatever when they found them. Just the idea of that was a small floating city, and a world, if you consider all the different nationalities as well. We haven't cracked the surface of the different nationalities on that ship. People think English, Irish, American, some Central Europeans, but the whole world was on that ship.
It's true. And the whole world loves to talk about Titanic. So check out Titanic Talk. Check out Ship of Dreams Film. They're both on Instagram as well, at Ship of Dreams Film and at Titanic_Talk_podcast. Again, as I mentioned, you can read all about the film on the website, shipofdreamsfilm.com. That's also where you can get your tickets to the Canadian screenings. Alexandra is on Instagram as well. Just search for her name. Otherwise, you can find her at First Class Woman, but without any vowels. Right? Get right to it. And check out Titanic Talk. Thank you, everybody, so much. Oh, I do have to get to this question since we are making this podcast with the book club. Megan asks in the chat, are there any chances the diaries actually get published in book form?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say. There is a chance, there is a possibility, and the answer is yes.
And
that's all I can say. That's all I can say. That's all I can say.
I also have to mention, you might know already, but someone in your film, Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, is Judy Preston-Incy, one of the core extras, and she has published her diary, so that's out there for you to get your hands on. Live in the legend. And gosh, any lasting thoughts or anything else you want to share before we say thank you, good night?
Well, no, I just, yes, everything. And just, I feel like it's all been said, but I don't mind saying it again. And I just enjoy these moments of connection. Thank God for Zoom, right? Where would we be now without Zoom?
Yeah, I think you're the first person for this podcast I've interviewed that was here in the States with me. Everyone else has been overseas. So
yes,
and you come from overseas, but
yes.
Even not feeling too well, thank you for joining us and
thank you.
Sharing the stories with us. And I want to thank Jill Carlier at the Titanic Book Club. Everybody out there listening, please be sure you're subscribed to the book club on YouTube and check out the official website, titanicbookclub.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, leave a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you love conversations with inspirational creators like Alexandra, you can find many more on my podcast, Cove Pod. Click over to that and give it a listen. I want to say thank you one last time to our guest, Alexandra Boyd, for joining us. Find Titanic Talk podcasts out there. Find Ship of Dreams film. And also her original feature film, Widow's Walk, which is on Amazon Prime, YouTube, and Apple TV. Check that out as well. Thank you, everybody out there, for tuning in. Until next episode, seize the day, follow your heart's fire, and make it count.